morning, everyone. As Chris has introduced us, my name is Emily Carroll, and here is Joe Robson. We work for Stantec, Archaeology and Heritage team as consultants, and today we'd like to present to you our paper. We're taking this public, a discussion surrounding public benefit in planning archaeology and the need for more sustainable and consistent processes. Now, there's no doubt that everyone in this room appreciates how important archaeology and heritage is to the public and how engagement and outreach can have a positive impact on an individual, regional, and also national scale. The Heritage Counts document by Historic England in 2018-2019 provides some brilliant statistics that show this perfectly. So, for instance, in 2015, it was estimated that visiting heritage sites saved the NHS £193.2 million in GP visits and psychotherapy sessions. In 2018, 53% of UK citizens said that a heritage is very important to them. And 2015, a study found that engagement with archaeology and heritage was linked to people's sense of happiness. As we can see from popular culture as well, that public outreach comes in many recognisable forms, such as TV shows, movies, museum exhibitions, etc. But in terms of planning archaeology, and certainly our day-to-day work, what about including public benefit into infrastructure schemes from their initiation? Well, Zufi's professional practice paper that was from Sadie, who opened the conference this morning, does provide some good context and insight into this. It defines public benefit as work which provides some benefit to the public. It highlights that public benefit should be defined on a project-by-project basis. It focuses on increased understanding of knowledge and knowledge gain, and states that opportunities for community, economic, and environmental benefits should be explored. So today, this paper also outlines 4 areas in which we can achieve public benefit, which is seen just here on the side of the screen. And these are going to be referred to as well throughout. So our presentation will focus on how Stantec and more broadly within consultancy, we can support the delivery of public benefit at the planning stage, advocating for and advising on the historic environment as part of new developments.
This presentation isn't a how-to on delivering public benefit. I wish it was through planning, but I'm going to talk through a couple of examples which show the sort of different scenarios that we work on to deliver public benefit through that advocating and advising on the historic environment before we move on to a bit of a discussion about the sustainability of delivering public benefit more generally. So the Celebration Mile scheme is a regeneration scheme in Bridgewater, which is looking to create a pedestrian priority way, which leads from Bridgewater train station, which is Grade 2 star listed, to the docks that is designed to celebrate and emphasise the history of the town. Previous schemes in Bridgewater have been more focused around heritage art installations, and sadly they've just suffered from lack of long-term management and therefore been unsustainable. Our contribution has been to ensure that the Celebration Mile delivers a sustainable heritage-led scheme, and this has been underpinned by in-depth desk-based research, early engagement with the conservation officer, with whom we undertook site walkovers, and our package of advice has included a heritage steer on things like sympathetic materials informed by the town's extant heritage assets, as well as its lost industries of brick and tile, supporting plans on lighting of historic buildings and then screening of negative elements like modern car parking, and referencing hidden heritage in street furniture and pause points. The public benefit and legacy of the scheme will be the delivery of an informed proposal that seeks to enhance the setting of heritage assets and better reveal their significance long term. Some schemes present sort of a lot more difficulties to overcome in order to achieve a material public benefit. So we're currently working on a large residential scheme where geophysical survey has established significant archaeological remains, shown on the slide behind. It includes a probable Romano British camp and settlement, and in regulatory terms, that site has been granted the green light for the excavation of those remains in principle, which cover around a quarter of the development area. And it presents a huge problem for our client in practical and financial terms. But moreover, our advice has been, what do you want the legacy of this scheme to be? Archaeology is a really good news story, and importantly, it provides a real concrete foundation for creating new community. Our advice to our client has therefore been simple, given the significance of these archaeological remains. All opportunity to retain them and build them into the community rather than lose it as part of its design should be explored. And despite all the difficulties relating to the loss of that extent of development footprint, our client have gone back to the drawing board now and they're revising their master plan with our support to evaluate parcels with lesser archaeological potential and find those opportunities to meet the land needs of the scheme whilst preserving that significant archaeology in situ. But what about when schemes are even bigger still? At Stantec, we're working on multiple new towns, including the Tendring and Colchester borders, garden community in Essex. Sorry, it's got a snappy title. The ethos of the town is sustainability, inclusive community, and seeking to create a legacy for future generations, almost like they sort of knew the theme of this year's conference. And it's another example where we've been doing that, advocating and advising on heritage, working first to establish that strong evidence base that you need to inform an evolving master plan. And at Stantec, as with other multidisciplinary consultancies, we're in the privileged position of being able to sit amongst environmental colleagues so that we can ensure collaboration, consistent approach to both the historic and the natural environment, making sure the decisions we're making for heritage aren't compromising elsewhere and vice versa, and understanding the constraints from the outset. Simple example being understanding you might have to navigate badger exclusion zones for trial trenching and how that might impact your evaluation process. Now, the evidence base is essential, but so is the way that we deliver that information. We all know the problems that come from academic material for non-specialist readers, including the public, but that really impacts our clients too. So for Colchester, we worked really hard to embed heritage in the master plan by delivering the findings of the HEDBA during a site walkover with the design team and presenting them again to the full architect team over Teams so that we could encourage a proper discussion and answer questions, some of which were really interesting. One architect was so intrigued by the concept of barrows as ritual sites and wanted to know, do people still visit them? Do people still worship at them or respect them? And how can that be built into the master plan? And even fragmentary military remains, which is what that photo is there, of a tiny fragment of a gun emplacement, generated discussion on how the sort of lost military history, the social history of that's no longer visible across that site could be better revealed through public display, like audible history installations, and basically just encouraging and supporting delivery for public benefit, for creating legacy that needs collaboration and discussion, not just simply technical reports. So what about temporary schemes? And can we deliver a legacy for heritage when the scheme itself isn't permanent? We're currently advising on a scheme to deliver a major solar farm which surrounds a listed building, a Grade 2 listed farm. Now, we've done detailed assessment and we can demonstrate that there will be very limited harm to the listed building as a result of temporary changes to its setting. And we've got support with the local advisors to the planning authority. The scheme would be long-term, around 40 years, but the indirect harm will be temporary. So how do we encourage public benefit by design in this instance? We explored the opportunity to restore an area of orchard planting as part of the scheme, with the listed building having once included orchard as part of its holdings when it formed part of a much larger and affluent estate. We worked with our in-house ecology team and landscape architects to present an orchard planting scheme which would have both ecological and landscape benefits as well as those heritage benefits. And the scheme's received really positive feedback so far from the consultees. So while small, it's the fact that a proportionate legacy will be achieved as part of that scheme. The last slide is permitted development. And permitted development doesn't take away our agency to achieve the level of public benefit that we would seek at the planning stage. The Water, the Energy Acts, as well as internal codes of conduct, oblige our utility clients to preserve the historic environment. We recently supported South West Water on their green recovery scheme, which necessitates laying of new pipelines and associated abstraction and pumping to increase water resilience in times of drought. The public benefits of the scheme in and of itself are really clear, but what about heritage? Thank you. It's a really good example of how advocating, advising and investigating the historic environment can really feed into that process. So we work with the engineers, many of whom have little to no direct experience of working directly with archaeologists to evaluate the pipeline route, firstly through geophysics, then working closely with our environmental colleagues to build in all the relevant constraints. And the pipeline was then rerouted to establish the route of least impact for heritage and environment. We then did a second phase of geophysical survey to find even better, sort of more an area of less impact, and the route was then further refined after that by trial trenching to ground truth the results of geophys and ensure minimal heritage impacts, all delivered under the obligations of the Water Act. Sometimes legacy isn't showcasing or better revealing significance. Sometimes it's literally leaving well alone and leaving that finite resource for future generations to investigate, whilst recording it with the local historic environment record to make sure we're aware of it. We recently took over, just an example where it doesn't go to plan, we recently took over on a pipeline where mitigation, loss of archaeological remains with mitigation has been accepted, without really an opportunity to see if we could reroute around that archaeology and preserve it in situ. But we've been working with the clients, we've got their confidence, and then we've asked the right questions. We're trying to advocate for that heritage, and we found ourselves in front of a very enthusiastic PR representative who's recognised the opportunity and has now released funding to invest in community outreach, with the nature of the site being conducive to site visits, which obviously lots of those sites delivered through planning aren't, but also followed up with local community talks. So projects can be turned around and legacy can be achieved even if the archaeology can't be preserved in situ.
So our team at Stantec is relatively new, having been founded about 4 to 5 years ago by our colleague Kathy Barnett. As such, archaeology and heritage is a new concept to many of our colleagues, specifically engineers, hydrologists, and even project managers as well have no idea we exist or what we even do. But shouting about our discipline and getting our colleagues excited gets us into those conversations early, which increases our opportunity to advocate, enthuse, investigate for better, for the benefit of heritage. So we found that spreading awareness of our existence and relevance doesn't take much effort at all. For instance, we've done toolbox talks, lunch and learns, social platforms. We've gone out on open days, and even just talking to colleagues when you're having a coffee and just telling you, I'm an archaeologist, I can help you out. So we are making ourselves known, and in doing so, we're becoming more cross-disciplinary as well, through having conversations with our colleagues in the wider environmental specialist team. At Stantec. So we sit within the environmental specialisms. We also collaborate with arboriculturalists, ecologists, landscape specialists, geotechs, just to name but a few. And we're really privileged to sit within that framework. And ultimately, this has shown us that public benefit can be achieved in a bigger cross-disciplinary way, where if we just start having those conversations, and then we can achieve it collaboratively on a much bigger scale. Now, we are in no way saying that any of the case studies that Joe has talked about today has been easy. If anything, it really hasn't. We've come across many hurdles along the way, some of which were insurmountable, but we have certainly carried on, we've striven through, and hasn't stopped us from trying. So we are now at a point where we need a long-term, sustainable and consistent approach to achieving legacy for our heritage. As an industry, we have demonstrated by volunteering our own time available how public benefit and outreach makes a sustainable contribution to society. So what do we need now? Do we need better legislation on public benefit? Could we collaborate even more with our colleagues to achieve benefit? Having spoken to our ecologists in-house at Stantec, they find themselves in the same position as we do. What about our stakeholders? Is a firmer stance on public benefit from them necessary? Can consultants incorporate public benefit into heritage packages earlier in the planning process, or establish a commitment to deliver if the project presents an opportunity to do so? Is there an appetite for a forum to share ideas and innovations, such as today? Do we need better engagement with the community outreach specialist interest group, maybe? Well, there you go. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I know there's a bit of a whirlwind tour. We had a lot to get through within 12 minutes, but we would now like to open the floor to you guys and hear any of your ideas or innovations, questions or comments that you may have about public benefit in planning archaeology. Thank you very much.